So today we're going to dive into a pretty revolutionary story from Buddhist history. It's all about how an ancient, super complex path to enlightenment got a complete makeover, opening it up not just for monks, but for, well, for everyone.
It's a question that sounds ancient, right? But it's also incredibly modern. I mean, in our crazy, busy lives, how are we supposed to find any kind of peace or deeper meaning? For centuries, the answer was basically, you can't. Not unless you're willing to just leave it all behind. But what if that was never the whole story?
Okay, so to really get why this shift was such a game changer, we first have to look at the old way of doing things. Let's talk about the traditional path to awakening, a path that for most people was completely unreachable.
Right, so the gold standard, the absolute peak of practice in the Tendai tradition, was something called Shikan. Think of it as a two-step process. First, you achieve calm, getting your mind totally still. Then, you use that stillness to gain insight, a profound understanding of reality itself. This wasn't just a path, it was considered the direct path to becoming a Buddha. But here's the thing, and it's a big one. This practice demanded a level of commitment that was just impossible for an ordinary person. You pretty much had to become a monk, seclude yourself from the world, and have years, literally years, to just sit in silent meditation.
And this was no weekend retreat, believe me. It was a massive undertaking. It started with years of just preparation, purifying your conduct, repentance. Only then could you move on to the intense meditation needed to achieve that state of calm. And only after you mastered that could you even attempt the final stage, that deep, deep contemplation for insight. It was a grueling, step-by-step climb up a very, very steep mountain.
But things were changing, and this super exclusive path meant that tons of people were just being left out. And this is where our story takes a fascinating turn. This is where an innovator steps onto the scene who saw that things had to change, big time.
So you have this monk in 13th century Japan. His name is Nichiren, and he just looks around. He sees people working, raising families, struggling to get by. That quiet monastery on a mountain, it might as well have been on another planet. He knew that for this teaching to actually mean something, it had to work for them, right where they were.
And you gotta love how direct Nichiren was about it. Now, when he said people were shallow and dull, he wasn't trying to be insulting. He was just being a realist. He had huge respect for the classical practice. He calls it profound. But he could also see with his own two eyes that it just didn't match the reality of people's lives anymore.
So what was his solution? Well, it was absolutely radical in its simplicity. He basically said, let's take these years of silent meditation that only the wise men have time for, and replace it with a single, focused vocal chant, something you could do anywhere, anytime, a practice that was open to absolutely everyone.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds a little too simple, right? How could one chant possibly do the same job as that whole complicated system of Shikoku Shinkan? Well, this is where Nichiren's genius really shines, because he showed that the chant didn't just replace it, it embodied the whole thing.
He taught that this single phrase, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, contained the entire power, the whole essence of both the calm and the insight stages. It wasn't a shortcut. It was more like a hyper-efficient compression of the entire path into one single powerful act.
Let's break this down, because it's pretty brilliant. The years of preparation, that was now fulfilled by your faith and your devotion to the chant itself. That intense focus you needed for calm, it actually just arises naturally from the rhythm and the sound of your voice. And insight, that deep awareness awakens through your faith in what you're chanting. But the most incredible part, attainment wasn't some far-off goal anymore. The practice and the realization were happening at the exact same time.
So, what's the big takeaway here? I mean, the impact of this change was, and still is, just profound. It completely flipped the script on who could achieve enlightenment and how they could do it.
What Nichiren did, essentially, was bring that exclusive, unreachable mountain path right down into the middle of the city. Awakening was no longer something you had to go find in seclusion. It was right there, in your home, on the street, accessible in the sound of your own voice.
And this beautiful quote from him just nails it. The ultimate truth of reality isn't some destination you have to travel to. He's saying that through this practice, it reveals itself right where you are, inside your own mind, in this very moment.
So it all comes down to one practice, one phrase, one single act that fuses the entire journey of calm and insight into a single moment.
So here's the thought to leave you with. What if the most profound journey we can take doesn't require us to go anywhere at all? What if the path to enlightenment wasn't somewhere else, but was actually here the whole time, waiting in the sound of your own voice?